Here we go. Bingo. All right. That is ironed out. Need to make sure this one good. We're hearing anything here? Yes, we are. Bingo. 1 second. Need to plug up to connection. We're good. All right. Is this as if this could not be catastrophe enough? I have done it. I believe we have acquired a stable connection. I should have checked this before going on here. That'd be the responsible thing to do, don't you think? Network connected USB LAN. This should be good right here. Okay. Good. Looks good. Looks great. Looks good. Sounds good. Bingo. All right. Well, after that whole debacle, let's get into it. Let me pop in my auricular devices and let's get to it. Alrighty, so last time I was talking about Kadwubek and his chronicles and going through and reading that. And I found someone earlier than him, which would be Gallus Anonymous, and he was the first chronicler to write about the history of Poland. The only things we do know about him is from his preface. He doesn't give us a name. He just writes about the bishops and addresses them. And that is how we know anything about him. And then from later chroniclers like Cromer, that's when we find out and get the nickname Gallus, because it's believed that he is to come from France, or modern day France. But at the time it was called Gaul. That is where we get that from. And it's interesting because I've seen a couple of videos where it's dubious. How can we trust what he's writing? Because it seems like this is just propaganda. And that's an interesting thought. And it begins to throw that maybe we should just doubt everything that he's written as to whether it could be trustworthy. And I don't think that is a proper way to go. I think I've seen this in philosophy when I was taking classes on Descartes. The beginning of his discourse, he speaks and addresses the bishop and the cardinals and those in charge, I believe, of the University of France. And it was interesting because it was very giving homage, much like Gallus is doing, and that is just how it is at the times. Like, they had the money to print, they had the authority. So if you were on the bad side, your book wouldn't probably get published. It'd be on the banned books list, and your book would go nowhere. So Descartes does the same thing, and then people are like, is he just making this up? Is he just putting on face? And we don't know. Like, he could, but he also couldn't. But I think if you read it through a lens, then you begin to see, like, okay, maybe was what he was doing, did he intend to have the effect that he did after? We don't know. But what we do know is that his work was pivotal and crucial in the development of modern philosophy. And it is fascinating. Not that I agree with everything he does or his starting point, but he saw a problem and he wanted to fix it. Now, did that create possibly more problems? One could argue yes. Others could say philosophy has actually gotten better. Regardless, going back to Gallus, I think it's important to see who is he, what do we know about him, and what I'd been doing recently is I found his original work in Latin. Found this on archive.org. And I've been going through and reading it, and it's interesting to read. Kind of get a snapshot into who he is. Now, it is said that we don't know the name of this author. And it said that Cromer, as I said earlier, gave him the name Gallus, meaning coming from France. And then we see, and they inference that he's not actually Polish because he speaks as if he's a pilgrim and that he's eating the bread of the Poles and that he doesn't want to upset or do anything contrary because he's a guest. And then we know the dates of when he's from, and they believe him to be a monk, possibly a monk in exile from Gaul, and he's entering into Poland, or modern-day Poland, because he's possibly not wanting to be in the bad graces of anyone anymore. Let me skip ahead here. Have it on my iPad, or else I would throw it up on the screen. And I took notes, so that's the only reason why I have it on my iPad. Maybe I'll figure out how to get this up on the screen. Took notes. And an insight that we get to Gallus is that he's loyal. So on the second page, he begins speaking, and he basically comes to the summation that he is loyal to those who have helped him, and that the sea of life, anything without a guide and experts, you'll be lost and you can't get there on your own. So he creates an analogy to the sea, and that to those that have helped him, he will remain loyal. He sees it as a great honor and dignity to be able to write about the history of Poland. And then we know that he is humble. We can take him for his word or you can doubt him, but he says, Igitur ne viles persone vidiamur vanitatis fimbrias, dilatare codicelum non nostro decrebimus, sed vesteris nominibus titulare. So that in order that his, vanity, he might not seem vain, rather than put his name, he puts the titles of all the bishops. And he did that on the first page. He addresses the Martinum. He was the Archbishop of Gniezno. We have Paul, or Paolo, or Pavel, who is, he's the Bishop of Płock. He addresses Władysław, who is the Bishop of Kraków, Bishop of Poznań, Wrocław, many, basically all the major bishops of the time. It's giving homage to them. And that's how we know the dates. So all of these are in the late 11th century. That's how we know the time that he was writing. And so basically just from this, he's very honored. He pays homage to the hierarchy. He wants to remain in their good graces. He hopes that this endeavor will be fruitful. And we know that he is humble. Now, some can argue that this is a problem, that he is just saying these things. He's not going to say anything bad about the hierarchy, the king, because he doesn't want to get in trouble. So he's going to write a history that is going to favor them. Could be true. But does that mean that everything he's writing should be discarded and thrown away? I don't think so, and I don't think he can, because this is a pivotal moment in the history of Poland. Just like Herodotus, when he wrote his first histories, not much was known about him, and he revolutionized history. Before it was all oral, it was passed down, and he decided that I'm going to write it down. And actually now, the way we can know about the history of ancient countries, of ancient Rome, is due to him putting pen to paper. Did he get everything right? Do we even get everything right today? No. So does that mean we throw out old accounts just because, it has to do with the church? Because he's in cahoots with them? I don't think so. Do we need to read the history through that lens? Of course. But I think we need to ask a question: can history at all be without bias? I think if I was thinking of an analogy, I think the most objective thing may be a police report or something of that sort, where it's just like, this happened, that happened. He walked into the store, he turned left, he went to the cash register, and he robbed the store. That can be a very objective account. But I think anyone that is writing a history, especially where you have to go through the first, he's writing this in the late 11th century. He's trying to cover everything beforehand. You got to pick and choose. And every historian has the responsibility to pick and choose what they seem as most important to whatever topic they're writing. Like if you're writing the American Revolution or the Civil War, there's only so many pages, and you're going to be the historian ultimately is the authority to say this is what I see as important for us today. I remember I took a class, and it is a book called Time as History, and it speaks a lot of Nietzsche, but it comes into history. And I want to read this and maybe comment on it. In Human All Too Human, Nietzsche says, lack of historical sense is the inherited defect of all philosophers. Or again, what separates us from Kant, as from Plato and Leibniz, is that we believe that becoming is the rule even in the spiritual things. We are historians from top to bottom. They all, to a man, think unhistorically, as is the age-old custom among philosophers. Previous philosophers have taken their contemporaries as if they were man as he always is, and proceeded from their definition of that supposedly unchanging being to make generalizations about the meaning of human life, and even about the whole of which man is a part. But it has become evident that all species, human as much as non-human, can only be understood as continually changing, that is, as having histories. Darwin made this patently clear about the other animals. There are not types of animals that are always on Earth. Species come to be and are in continual change and pass away. The same is so about ourselves. What is fundamental about all human behavior, including our understanding of it, itself a behavior, is its historicity. What is fundamental about all human behavior is its historicity. I think it's interesting that what we have here is that we need a historical sense in order to develop and become better and learn from the past. As they say, history repeats itself. And so we need to learn from its mistakes, where we can grow, what was actually good, and where we can return to. I think this is an important shift that Nietzsche is reaching, is that before we've always seen man as a unchanging being. We have a nature to us that is common to all men, and that part is unchanging, whereas we also have changing parts of ourselves. And I think whenever we want to maybe be skeptical of these older historians, it's because we want to maybe get rid of that antiquated view of man. Because all these writers, these early writers, Gallus included, he was writing in Latin in a Catholic world, and he was saying things that were positive, and not that I've completely read what he has read, but he's within a system of his day that was fundamentally known that human nature is what it is. We have a certain end, a certain goal that we want to reach. And he understood that. So now that we know who Gallus is, very briefly, from what we little know, from what I've read from his prologue to his chronicle, we've talked about, can he be trusted? I think if you read and you know that where he's coming from in a certain time frame, then yes. I think there are things that have written down that are passed down that post chroniclers have wrote about, that if you take away that, then like what is the where do you start? Like, we have to have some sense of trust when reading history. Obviously, you know the biases, you know the situation that helps understand it. But I think we need to come with an attitude of trust. And then he's so important because he began writing down the oral, passed down histories that he himself received. And then we've addressed, why does some not seem as credible? Well, because maybe he's just propaganda. He's just paid to write these nice things about the king, whereas we all know that the king was terrible. Which honestly, I don't know. I don't have enough experience. I haven't read enough. I hope to know. I hope to know. But I think this is just common. Like, history is not clear in antiquity, because even in the Herodotus, the histories and their introduction by the, I believe, editor. Let's see. Yeah, the editor, in the general introduction, he writes, it's impossible to give certain and undisputed dates for the lifetime of Herodotus. But then he goes on, but if we are to believe Aulus Gellius, he was born in 484 BC, and the internal evidence of his history proves that he was alive during some part of the Peloponnesian War. So I think in this era, our mindset is that we need everything to be proven, concrete, because that's the effect of Descartes, is that if we can doubt something, and if we don't know it with certainty, then we don't need to think about it. But that's not how history is thought. It's not how we view things. We viewed things through a lens of trust. Not so much trust where you're blindly just saying, oh, you said something, that's it. We're going to keep going. But it's like, okay, this guy, Aulus Gellius, said something. We're going to look into the history that Herodotus wrote. It seems like these two things line up, so it can be believed. Like, because obviously we don't have a bunch of first-hand accounts. Maybe you do. But largely from that time, it's like, who was all writing this stuff down? Writing was expensive. So thought it was funny or profound, cool, that I was watching a video. Let me watch this. Hey, watch this transition. Can I get it to transition? How do I transition? How do I transition scenes? Can I get it to transition? Can I get a fade? How do I do this? We're learning here. This is definitely a lot better than the last one. Got it better set up. My computer's not like bouncing. You're not like watching an earthquake. My microphone worked after I checked. I made sure I checked, because the last time it was 30 minutes of me just talking like that. No noise whatsoever. It was terrible. But here we are. Now I'm trying to figure out how the heck can I get this nice transition. Keyboard reference. Keys. I'm gonna do a T. Watch this. Ready for this? Are you all ready for this? Come on. I didn't hit save, did I? Save. Delete. Get down. Position. Do the squiggly. Here we go. Are you serious? I'm literally going into the hotkey. Preference. Hotkeys. Transition. Oh, scene position. I mean, come on. Go on here. Fade. Wiggly. Fly. Wiggle. What are we doing here? This is amateur hour. Hitting. Was that it? That's it? Oh, it is a fade. Hey, up that duration there. Smooth transition. Nice. Experience. All right. What are you looking at? What I'm seeing. Why is that? On again. Oh well. Another window open? Is that what's I do. There we go. Technical difficulties. Which one is it? I have like 40 windows open. How do we get this going here? Terrible. Wait. No way. I can go to this and I can go to the oh, this is cool. I can go from the Mac to my second monitor here and I can continue going to the iPad. That's impressive. Even do that. Did not know. You know what I'm gonna do? I think this would be better experience if this is this. Oh. That way on this one can get me reading and I'm looking like that. This thing is frozen. That is what's going on. Screen capture. Restart. Yes, you are seeing it. It is very small. Great. Really great. Got bigger. Bang bong. All right. Getting down into it. Let's look around. So the first part was my previous research, and now I think the more fun part and the more organic part is me going through and reading some stuff. I actually, let me investigate here. Can I put my iPad screen on here? 'Cause if so, then I can just read the Latin, translate it live. Live on the air. Mm-mm-mm. Bum, 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 bum. Can only do this. Alright, that's alright. I do have this written down. A link to the said text of Gallus. Could find it. I was reading Kadwubkush or Kadwubek. He was fun. Then I had Maciej Zmiechova. Also, there we go. YouTube. I found a lot of videos. Now my Polish is getting better. It is not perfect, but what I do enjoy is that I'm able to Gallus Anonymous, and then I can go here to Polski Radio RDC.
You, just you, building your app.
Let me get a little advertisement in there.
Describe it.
Państwa bardzo serdecznie w Historii bez tabu, kolejnym odcinku programu, czyli tego, czego nie uczą w szkołach. Nie wiemy, kim był, ani skąd przybył, ale jest zapewne najbardziej znanym anonimem w polskiej historii. Jednym z tych, który najbardziej wpłynął na naszą wiedzę o przeszłości kraju, szczególnie o jego początkach. Dziś będziemy rozmawiać o Gallu Anonimie, pierwszym kronikarzu w historii Polski. Tak przynajmniej o nim mówimy, ale czy rzeczywiście był Galem? I czy rzeczywiście kronikarzem? A może jednak bardziej panegirystą, a może też w pewnym sensie obrońcą Bolesława Krzywoustego. No i najważniejsze.
So basically he opens it up with questions like, all right, who is this man? Is he even from France? Is he even to be believed, or is he just paid to be a defender of Bolesław III? So just like I was talking about, these are actually valid questions, good questions to have. And this is what this whole podcast is about.
Pytanie, czy Gallowi Anonimowi, jeśli już go tak nazywamy, i jego przekazowi można ufać? O tym wszystkim porozmawiam dziś z profesorem Pawłem Żmudzkim z Wydziału Historii Uniwersytetu Warszawskiego. Witam, dzień dobry.
So you brought in a Polish historian from the University of Warsaw to address these questions. And I think this is like a really fascinating talk.
Czy wyobrażasz sobie, przepraszam, jesteśmy na pan, ponieważ razem studiowaliśmy. Na ty. My jesteśmy na pan, jesteśmy na ty, bo razem studiowaliśmy. Czy wyobrażasz sobie polską historię bez Galla Anonima?
Nie wyobrażam sobie. I to jest...
So basically,
Gall Anonim przystępuje do pracy
my
z tym
gosh.
momentem, kiedy...
Pause. So he asked the first question, can there be history without Gallus? Gall Anonim. Możemy. And he says, no. And let's go into why. Let me reverse a little bit. No, it doesn't seem to me, and...
Ten moment, moment, w którym Gallus przystępuje do pracy, jest takim momentem, kiedy no, kończy się właściwie samodzielny obieg tradycji ustnej.
So he's saying it's very important because this is in the time, like I was saying earlier, and that's where I kind of got it from, was from this, was that Polish history at this time is very important because now we're making the transition from the traditional telling of history, which is through word of mouth.
To jest dość ważne, że Gallus Anonymous rejestruje tę tradycję. My, czytając jego kronikę, możemy najczęściej wyobrażać sobie, czy tworzyć hipotezy na temat tego, co wiedziano i o czym opowiadano, jeśli chodzi o historię Polski wcześniej. Natomiast po Gallu jest to już taki podwójny obieg, że ta tradycja ustna oczywiście cały czas jest.
So he's basically saying that we get a sense of how history was told because through the lens and aspect of Gallus or Gall, we can understand how history was passed down, what events happened, because he's ultimately been the reception of what he heard.
To cały czas są opowieści, cały czas się mówi o historii i być może mówi się trochę innymi opowieściami niż te, które zarejestrował Gallus Anonymous, ale rzeczywiście od momentu powstania dzieła Gallus Anonymous trudno sobie wyobrazić już to, że go nie ma. To się zgadza. To jest ogromny postęp, jeśli chodzi o polską historiografię.
This is just a huge step. Like, you cannot discount the OG. You can't throw him away because he's ultimately one of the building blocks of Polish history. Oh yeah. Love a good cold cup of coffee. I like it. Like this. This is cool. A nice view. Watching together. Oglądamy razem ten video.
To jest ten moment, kiedy możemy sobie już nawet dzisiaj zajrzeć jakby przynajmniej do tego, co on wiedział albo co chciał przekazać w swoich czasach, czyli w połowie XII wieku. Nie, na początku XII wieku, przepraszam,
tak.
na początku XII wieku. A czemu był anonimem? Dlaczego nie zapisał swojego imienia?
No tu możemy.
And then he addresses, why in the heck? Why did this man not write his name down? Why would he be anonymous? Because I think maybe, we see confidential people or people reporting things confidential. They don't want their names to be known. Usually it's out of fear. Is that why he himself did it out of fear? Maybe.
Tylko podejrzewać, a to podejrzenie bierze się z.
Okay, that's one word I don't know. Podejrzewać. Gotta translate. Good old Google. Podejrzewać. To suspect. I suspect.
Z poważnego potraktowania słów samego Galla Anonymous, który w wstępie do pierwszej księgi swojej kroniki, kronika ma 3 księgi, tak chyba już sam autor, znaczy na pewno sam autor już ją tak podzielił, to właśnie
So basically saying,
widząc te wstępy
as I said at the beginning, and when you read his prologue, you get, that's the only things we know about him. And what he's saying is that he wrote 3 books, and they're certain that he wrote 3 books because the intros to these all kind of have the same style.
Do kolejnych ksiąg. No i w pierwszej na samym początku umieścił cały polski episkopat właśnie, zresztą dzięki temu my możemy dość precyzyjnie datować czas powstania dzieła Galla Anonymous.
Then he's saying he addressed the whole Polish episcopate, all of them. That's how we know the time that he was alive.
No i dodał, że właśnie nie swoje imię, a imię tych właśnie dostojnych ojców, biskupów i arcybiskupa gnieźnieńskiego umieszcza na początku, ponieważ ich uważa za prawdziwych autorów dzieła. Oczywiście nie wiemy, czy to jest...
And, oh, this is something that I left out. He does say this, as the great professor has said, that the reason why he didn't write his name is because he's not the real author. The real author is those great men that have lived and that have written history. They are the authors, and he's merely just documenting it and writing it down.
Kurtuazja, czy to jest wyraz skromności, czy to jest captatio benevolencje, prawda, czyli pozyskiwanie jakiegoś właśnie przyjazności i przychylności tych
Sponsora.
właśnie... No, sponsorem chyba był książę, bo z całą pewnością jemu jest...
So then he's like, okay, we don't know whether this was out of what motive he had. And then the other man said, maybe all the bishops were sponsors and that's why he had to do it. And he's like, no, the sponsor was the prince.
Dedykowana kronika i on z całą pewnością jest pierwszoplanowym bohaterem kroniki.
Because the prince is the sole main character of this history. And that's why also people say like, oh, he's just writing this for Bolesław III.
Choć czasem oczywiście Gall był w stanie, to a propos tego panegiryzmu, był w stanie dość cierpkie słowa gdzieniegdzie napisać o Bolesławie III, którego my nazywamy krzywoustem. Gall jeszcze tego przydomku nie znał. Natomiast z całą pewnością, czy może właśnie z całą pewnością to jest złe słowo, ale hipotetycznie możemy założyć, że właśnie dlatego, że chciał uhonorować biskupów, dlatego swojego imienia nie podał. No oczywiście możemy się zastanawiać, czy...
So then he's basically saying, okay, so what we really do know is that maybe he is just wanting to honor all these bishops, and they're the sole people that he wants to honor, not himself.
Gall
he continues.
Jakimś rodzaju ghostwritera, prawda? Takiego właśnie autora do wynajęcia, który to jeszcze pewnie będziemy o tym mówić, że ostatnio bardzo ciekawą metodę badawczą zastosował profesor Tomasz Jasiński, który właśnie starał się potwierdzić dawną hipotezę w sprawie innych, czy innego, to najczęściej tylko jedno dzieło wskazywano, innego dzieła, które ten sam autor właśnie, niestety tamto dzieło też jest anonimowe, napisał i to uprawdopodobnia takie myślenie, że mamy do czynienia z wędrownym mnichem intelektualistą, rzeczywiście literatem
So he's like, okay, we don't know much about him, but what we do know from his writing is that he's very intellectual, he's literate, writes very well, so we do know that about him.
pierwszej próby i to jest absolutnie pierwsza liga Europy Łacińskiej.
He says here, he's like got the best of the best with his Latin. Pierwsza liga Europy Łacińskiej. Like his Latin is like top of the top.
I może dlatego również jego imię nie pada.
To ja zacytuję ten początek kroniki, oczywiście w polskim, dosyć starym tłumaczeniu, ale to specjalnie. Aby nas przeto nikt nie posądzał, iż strzępy próżności staramy się na popis rozwijać, książeczkę naszą postanowiliśmy nie własnem, lecz waszemi imiony zatytułować. Dlatego też chwałę z tej pracy i zaszczyt przypisujemy książętom ojczyzny. To zaś, co na nas w udziale z tego względu spada, rzeczą będzie waszego sądu i względności nam przyznać.
Tak, no więc tu zresztą tam w dalszych wstępach do dalszych ksiąg pojawiają się kolejne osoby, które dla Galla były ważne. Okazuje się, że to nie tylko episkopat, a właściwie episkopat, ale z niego najważniejszy był biskup Paweł, biskup poznański. Natomiast pojawia się też kanclerz Michał, pojawiają się...
Basically saying here that not only was he just addressing bishops, they weren't the only important one, but also other people at the time, like Chancellor Michael or Michał.
Anonimowi pracownicy.
Pojawia się też biskup M.
To jest
Inicjał,
arcybiskup
to jest
M, tak. My go znamy, bo on się pojawia z imienia już w dalszym ciągu kroniki, więc wiemy, że to jest
Ale skąd
arcybiskup
M?
No, to
Zabrakło
jest, nie, to,
tuszu?
nie, to jest, różnymi względami można to tłumaczyć, ale najbardziej prawdopodobne jest po prostu obyczaj kopisty. No, musimy pamiętać, że my nie mamy autografu Galla Anonima, więc my
Mhm.
nie wiemy, jak to Gall zapisał. Pewnie raczej jednak zapisał on osobiście, albo jakiś pisarz, któremu służył, jakiś skryba. Być może Gall miał jakiś swój warsztacik taki pisarski, nie musiał wszystkiego sam zapisywać. I w każdym razie tego pierwowzoru my nie mamy, tego pierwszego zapisu kroniki Galla Anonima, więc nie wiemy, jak tam te imiona były umieszczone. Natomiast
So basically it's saying like, why did he write M? We don't have his handwriting, his script or anything. And let's track forward here. Okay, why was he called from Gaul? And where do we get this nickname?
pomysłodawcą jest Marcin Kromer, czyli
Kromer.
najwybitniejszy polski historyk XVI wieku. Autor
15th
takiej
century
monumentalnej
author.
pracy napisanej bardzo elegancką łaciną, bazującej na rocznikach Długosza, ale no, była to takie dzieło, które rozsławiło historię Polski na całą Europę. Zresztą było wydawane w Bazylei, w Kolonii, rzeczywiście tutaj zagraniczne drukarnie je drukowały i to rzeczywiście uczyniło z tego dzieła Kromera no, taki bestseller na całym
So he's just talking about
zachodzie,
Cromer's
czytającym
book
po
right
łacinie,
now.
bo właśnie tu
It was
cały
like
czas jest
very
język
elegant Latin
łaciński,
bestseller.
językiem nauki. No i Kromer badał źródła. Rzeczywiście, jak już został biskupem warmińskim, to w bibliotece na zamku
So Cromer was the source of this.
znalazł rękopis, kodeks XV-wieczny, tak zwany kodeks Szamotulskiego, bo on powstał
So
dla
Szamotulskiego
możnowładcy
codex.
Szamotulskiego. No i tam właśnie znalazł kronikę, którą przeczytał z wielkim zainteresowaniem, wykorzystywał ją w swoim dziele. No, on na marginesie, właśnie na górze
So and he wrote in the margins of this codex.
napisał właśnie taką odręczną uwagę i to on nadał mu kryptonim Gal.
So then he named him Gaul in the margins, but because I think
no, najważniejszego sanktuarium świętego Idziego, to była
so then because he was mentioning a pilgrimage to holy site, a sanctuary, and from that I think he found out he was from Gaul. So that is what I do know. These are the reasons why I think we can trust and read Gallus Anonymous. And if I was able to pull it up, I would read along. You go through a page or two of the original Latin. Oh, wait. I have the PDF. Beautiful. I'm going to pull that up right now. Get this page of screen capture. Go to window. Preview Chronicon. Beautiful. This stare Chronicon. This is off of archive.com. I made it to whopping page 4, I believe. Here we go. This is the preface, I believe, of the author. Here he is, yeah. So here's where he's addressing all the bishops. Domino de M, which they say litera haec indicat Martinum. So they're saying this M is the bishop of Gniezno. Come through here. So then we end the preface and we begin the epilogue. So this is a 3-part book. This is the first part. So he's writing of Bolesław here. Bolesław was Duke Inclitus Dei Dono Progenitus. hic per preces Egidii sumpsit causam exordi. So Boleslav, the king of, or leader of great honor, who was given as a gift of God. And so, through the requests of Egidius, I have received or brought up cause of this exordium, or this writing. Qualiteris tud fuerit, si Deus hic annuerit, possumus vobis dicere si placiat adiscere. Annuerit means to read. To nod. Alright. Had nothing of a great mark there. Did I finish this? You know what I did have the question is, who's this Egidius? We have Boleslav, Dux Inclitus, man of great leadership, and it's through the request of Egidius that he begins to write this. Salutavit. Aurum ilico funditor effigies effigitur profund pro futuro filio sancto mitunt edigio. Is this his brother? Is Egidius the brother of Boleslav? We will find out. This is Boleslav, I believe the second or the third. Brother Egidius. His half brother. Zbigniew. Zbigniew. Brother. His illegitimate half brother. Each ruled a Polish province during their father's lifetime. So going back, Boleslav the Third. Where are we at here? Boleslav the Second, Boleslav the Third. He'd be the 21st king and or prince of Poland. That makes sense. Would that be? Let me go and double check the dates. Let me make sure this is the right Boleslav that we're talking about here. What dates do we have? 1107 to 1138. Maybe that's the second that he's talking about here. That would make more sense, because he's writing this in the late 10th century. Wait, no, late 11th. So then, okay, so this must be him. That Gallus Anonymous or Gallus Anonymous is talking about. So it's his half brother that he ruled Poland with. Nec mora misi properant per terras quas non verant, praeteriuntes Galliam prevenerum provinciam. They sent Edigio, I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly, they sent his brother Zbigniew to lands that they didn't know, mostly to Gallium. Misi munera pofreunt monarchi gratis referunt causam narant itineris e qualitatem operis. Misi munera proferunt. Tunc monachi convivio iunare triduo, et dum agunt iunium mater concepit filium. Wait a second. We're talking about the birth. Never mind. We're talking about the birth of Boleslav here. Aurum argentum palia donaque mitunt alia vestes sacras et aureum calicem sat idoneum. Aurum ilico funditor effigies effigitor quam profutu fideo sancto mitunt edigio. I'm a little confused here. Now it says edigio. Who is the father of this Boleslav the third? Władysław. He was the only child of Duke Władysław I Herman and his wife Judith of Bohemia. Oh, come on. We gotta be able to know more about this. Genuine dukes, secret days. Ergo gravem inveniant ducissimo. Sic puer ille nascitur qui Boleslavus dicitur, cum Vadislas genuit dux, sicut Deus voluit. Golly, Pete. Trying to figure out who the heck we're talking about here. Sum sit carum exordi. So we're talking about Boleslav here. Then we're talking about the parents. And then he's talking about how they fasted, and after the third day, then the mother conceived. Et provera pronunciant quod misi sic inveniant. And for this they pronounced that they found what they were sent for, their purpose. Monachi rem recipiunt, miserere cupiunt, transiuntis Burgundiam, remearunt Poloniam. Ergo gravem inveniunt ducissimum quando veniunt. Sic puer ille nascitur, qui Boleslavus dicitur. See, this is like a daggum poetry right here. Sic puer ille nascitur, qui Boleslavus dicitur. So, his name is Boleslav. After much prayers, he is born. Whom quam Wadislaus genuit dux sicut Deus voluit, genitrix Judith nomine, fatali forsan homine, Judith salutavit populum per holifernis jugulum, ista peperit filium, triumphatorum hostium, de cuius gestis scribere iam tempus est insistere. So here we go. This is where Gallus is talking and praising the leader. Because what he's writing, and I can see why people would be like, wow, he must have been paid, because this is like very poetic. He's God's gift to the earth. He's like, if you're reading this, you're like, dang, this guy must be like the daggum best. Genitrix Judith nomine, fatali forza nomine. And then he's talking about incipiunt chronicae justa ducum sive principum Polonorum. We're talking here about the chronicles, the history and acts of the kings and princes of Poland. Quoniam orbis terrarum in universitate spatiosa, a regibus ac ducibus, plurimis plurima memorabilia. There are many memories. Geruntur quae fastidiosa negligentia follis philosophorum, forsitan in opia silentio continguntur opere pretium tuximus quastam res gestas Polonicorum principum gratia cuiustam gloriosissimi ducis ac viteriosissimi nomine Boleslavi stilo puerili potius exarare quam ex toto posteriorum memoriae nihil notabile reservare. So there's so much going on, and maybe to the negligence of the philosophers, there's been silence about the actions of the Polish kings and princes. And thanks to the most glorious leader and the most victorious leader, named Bolesław, stilo puerili potius exarare. Todos. I think it's stilo. Wow. Puerili potius exerare quem ex toto posterior memoria nihil notabile reservare. Opeo etiam maxime quod Dei dono precibusque sancti Egidii natus fuit. Oh, so he's a saint? Saint Egidius? Oh, Saint Giles. Saint Giles the Hermit. Let me put on this. We got St. Giles here. So this is who he's writing about. He was a hermit or monk active in the Lower Rhone, likely in the 7th century. The legend... How... They're talking about this. They're talking about... Maybe they prayed to him. Patron saint of people with disabilities, is invoked as a saint for childhood fears, convulsions, depression. Monasteries dedicated in France, Spain, Germany, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Great Britain. Interesting. So this is an insight into Polish religious history, is that St. Giles is historically a very important figure, saint, that is revered. Now let's see if I'm thinking of this correctly. If I have the right Bolesław here. So we have Władysław and Judith of Bohemia, which is mentioned. Does it have anything about his birth? Here we go. Here this makes sense. Here we go. The lack of a legitimate heir, however, remained a concern for Władysław. They sent rich gifts to the Benedictine sanctuary of St. Giles. Polish envoys were led by the personal chaplain of Duchess Judith. So they, as we can say here, that I was just reading, that Bolesław, the Bolesław was born on the day of Saint Stephen, King of Hungary. Going back. Did I get to that point yet in the chronicle? Did I get to that yet? I don't know. We will see. Let's see. Okay, this is interesting. So we've gotten insight into Bolesław. We've gotten insight into early Polish piety, saints that they revered. St. Giles. Very important. You know what I can do? I'll make this a lot smoother. Add new scene. macOS screen capture. Right. Oh my. Go window. I'm gonna go Chronicon. Go. I'll make this go away. I'm gonna bring this right here. There it is. This is what we were reading. This is what we have seen on Wikipedia. So now I know that my Latin reading is great. No, it's average. A lot better things that I could be doing. Okay, so this makes sense now. Through the prayers of St. Giles, he was born. And then we go to the bottom. Well, this is why. Provenium provinciam. Okay, this makes sense now. So this is where they were fasting. This is why they were saying they went to a different province. Oh, okay, so they brought gold, they bought silver, palaces, many gifts, sacred vestments, chalices. They brought them to this sanctuary to give, and they fasted. And here they have their heir. They had Bolesław III. So now this makes sense why at the beginning he's writing Bolesławus Dux Inclitus, from the gift of God, because this family was praying for this son to be born, to have an heir. They go to the sanctuary of St. Giles, and they have the son, Bolesław. This makes sense. It's saying, Omine Iudes salutavit populum per Holofernes Jugulum. What is a Jugulum? This over here. What is a Jugulum? Jugulum. Throat. Okay. Holofernes. What is that? Holofernes. And what? What? So confused. Talking about a biblical thing here. That does not make any sense. What? We got St. Giles. Oh, look in the Deuterocanonical Book of Judith. The Assyrian general Holofernes led a devastating siege against the Jewish town of Bethulia. Judith dressed in her finest garments. Okay. I remember this biblical story. Now returning this book. What? Why did Judith salutavit populum per Holofernes Jugulum? To the throat of Holofernes? Maybe this is a location that I have no idea. Maybe this is referring to something else. Iste peperit filium triumphatorum hostium de cuius gestis scribere iam tempus est insistere. So that indeed a child has been born to be the triumph of the peoples. And this is who we write about. So then we start the Chronicum. quoniam orbis terrarum in universitate spatiosa regibus ac ducibus plurima memorabilia. Okay, that just read this. They're talking about the philosophers they have forgotten about the great Polish kings, and they've forgot to mention the glorious and most victorious Bolesław the Third, the Wrymouth. Ob hoc etiam maxime, quod Dei dono precibusque sancti gerinatus fuit, perquem ut credimus bene fortunatus semperque victoriosus extitit. Et qui regio Polonorum abitineribus peregrinorum est remota, et nisi transeantibus in Russiam pro mercimonio, paucus nota si breviter indi diseratur. Remota. What does remota mean? It's like remote as in far off. Remote does not help. Does not help here. Great sire. This is interesting. Now we're talking about sed quia regio Polonorum abitineribus peregrinorum est remota. Okay, so because the kingdom of Poland is far from pilgrim, and even though they went into Russia for mercimonio, what do we got there? Mercimonio. Or mercenary. I think I'm off on something here. Sed quia regio Polonorum. Let me copy and paste this bad boy. Put this in the old Google Translate here. Make sure I copy. Oh my. Oh, you have no idea how hot this MacBook is right now trying to run all this. Oh, it's not bad. 22% of the CPU. Don't need. Alright. Paste. Uh-huh. Okay, got that completely wrong. Completely wrong. But because the region of the poles is remote from the itineraries of pilgrims, unless it is passed over to Russia for merchandise, it is known to few. This is why people are like, hey, nobody's talking about Poland. And it's like, Gallus is like, hey, it's a low-key secret. Nobody goes there unless they're passing through for merchandise and going over to Russia. Now that's why nobody's written about the daggum history, is because nobody knows about it. So this little section between the Odra and the Wisła, mystery land. He's uncovering that mystery. He is unfolding the mystery. Interesting. So he's like, Poland is a low-key secret. People need to know more about this. He's like, I'm going to write about it. And indeed he did. 3-part book. And he's talking about the parts. Matko. Here we go. Nulli veriatur absurdum et si pro parte describenda totum inducator nemo reputet onerosum. Iditu ab Aquilone Polonias septentrionalis pars Esclavonie. Septentrionale, I think that's the south. We habet ab Oriente Rusiam. The east is Russia. Ab Austro-Hungarium, that's like what, down here? Subsolano, Moraviam, et Bohemiam, I think that's down. Ab Occidente Danium, Saxoniam, Collaterales. That's German area over there to the west. Ad mare altum septentrionale vel affintronale tres habet affines barbarorum gentilium ferocissimas nationes. And he's saying to the north of septentrionale, but towards the sea. Subsolanum, Moraviam, et Bohemiam. Wait. So there's people like the most ferocious barbarians. Silentiam, Pomeranam, et Prusiam. Contra quas regios Polorum dux assidue pugnant. So he's like, these guys to the north by the sea, he's like the worst dudes, and we're always fighting against them. Silentiam. Let me switch over to the old browser here. Silentiam. That up here, Silentiam. I want to know the modern. That's selenium. We go 11th century. Early 12th century entity at or near the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. Mentioned only in the chronicles of Gallus Anonymous, who listed as one of the three northern neighbors of Piast Poland. The other ones being Pomerania and Prussia. It has been proposed that Silencia was misspelled of Lutetia, or that Silencia was a short-lived state centered on the Oder estuary, probably destroyed by Boleslav III, according to the Annals of Krakow. Okay, so see, like, going, even just reading this, you click on this, there's not much on it, but then even when there is, they're like, Silencia is mentioned twice in the first book of Gallus Anonymous, a chronicle composed in Piast Poland between 1112 and 1118 to glorify the Piast dynasty in general and the contemporary Piast ruler Boleslav III, the Wrymouth. Yep, so this is what we just read. See, you wouldn't have known this if you didn't read Gallus. It's a little history. You got to the north, you had, was it a clan? Is that what they said? Or a tribe? At or near the southern coast? Oh, yeah, okay. Is there a map? Can I get a map? Map of Piast Poland, 11th century. I'd like images, please. Thank you. Where are these? Oh, here we go. This looks promising here. Matko. we have who we're speaking of here at present on this map here. I don't see it. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Where? $11.15. Pomerania and Prussia. Is there Pomerania? Or Prussia? Can we get one of them? Okay. Here we go. Pomerania is there. Prussia is here. So if I can make an assumption, maybe this is where they're in between there, but this is 11:38, and they're saying here that it's supposedly 11:15. These Silentias or Lutetia settled on the Oder estuary. Odra. So if we find the Odra, give me a map with the rivers on it. And we get up close there. The Oder is on this. Oh, okay, so that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Unless they moved around a lot. This is shocking. Pomeranians and Prussia, so then we had Silencia here, Pomeranians here, and then the Prussias over there at Samara, where I think where Belarus is today. It's interesting though that this is the only reference we have. But we have some other sources. German sources. I can't read German. To jest problem, nie? Bingo. All right. Switching back one last page. So he's talking about what's around it. Talking about they're fighting all the time. Ut eas ad fidem convertat. We fight so that we can convert them to the faith. Sed nec lario predicationis coreorum a perfidia potu revercare. Nec lario jugulationis eram penitus viperalis progenies aboleri. Sepetam principes eorum aduce Poloniensi prelio superati ac baptismum confugerunt. Although so sometimes they can convert them to be baptized. Itemque collectis viribus fidem Christianum abnegantes contra Christianus bellum denua paraverunt. So they're not a Christian nation. Sunt etiam ultra eus et in brachia amphictrionis alia barbarae gentilem nationes et insulin habitantes ubi perpetua nix est et glacies. Then he's saying, oh, there's even more. You go up more and there's more guys and there always is snow and ice. I think he's talking about like Swedes, Norways, the daggum Vikings. All right. Hour 26. That hurts. So much Latin. I think from now on, I'm just going to be like a live researching. That'd be fun. Run on the fly. Have research, read this, then go to Wikipedia, and then you find out that I, didn't read the Latin right, but then I'm corrected. That's that. Gallus, you can trust him. Know his little biases. Read it accordingly, but you're going to learn a lot. Like, I bet you didn't know about the Siletium and the Pomeranum and Prusium barbarians that they always fought against. But you do now.